During World War II and the Korean War, I was in the Marine Corps. The highest rank I achieved was first lieutenant.
Okay, I think it'd be good, Jack, if we started off just by give the viewers a little bit of perspective of what we're going to be talking about. So if you just hold that map up and she can get in a close shot for us. And you kind of point out where Hawaii is over here.
Okay, well, during the entire time that I was in the Marine Corps, our travels were in the Pacific. San Diego is right up here. When we left the United States to go to the Marshall Islands, we left from San Diego. This are the Hawaiian Islands. This are the Philippine Islands. We traveled from San Diego, bypassed Hawaii, and made our first landing at Roy-Namur in the Marshall Islands. The plan at that time, which we followed, the overall plan, as time went on, we would go through Saipan, Tinian, Iwo Jima on the way to Japan.
Okay, since the events of December 7th, 1941 are really the defining events of World War II, we like to start each of our interviews with veterans by asking them what they remember about December 7th, 1941, how they reacted, their parents, their peers, anything you can remember about December 7th, 41.
December 7th, 1941 was a Sunday. I went to Sunday school and church on that Sunday. It was typical sunny, nice day. And after church, I went to what we called a soda shop. Now that was kind of a hangout for kids at that time. I was 16 at that time. Soda shop, you could get a Coke or ice cream. We had a jukebox and things like that. That's where I heard about Pearl Harbor. I didn't hear it on the radio, but I heard it from others. Frankly, I was not sure where Pearl Harbor was. I knew it was ours, United States. I knew it was serious, but I wasn't sure just where it was. At that time, growing up, I was an avid reader of the newspaper. My family was. Believed very much you stay on top of current events. And I delivered papers, so I'd followed what was going on in the world, but never dreamed that anything like Pearl Harbor would happen. We didn't know what the consequences would be of that, but we knew that we were in and would be in a war, and we just didn't know how severe it would be. But it was shocking to all of us what had happened. We knew it eventually would involve us. My group of friends at that time, we were 16 years old. So we knew that we would be involved in this at some point.
Well, you obviously led you to make some decisions about going into the Marines. Tell us about you deciding to go into Marines and how that went.
Well, I graduated from high school the spring following December 7th, 41. I started college at Mitchell College in Statesville, North Carolina. At that time, the different branches of the service came around to colleges, seeing if you would want to join up for a V12 program, which meant you could continue your education, excuse me, after the year that you were in, the Marine Corps, the Navy, Army, whatever, would pick up the cost of your education, but you would be in that branch of service. I decided that I would want to be in the Marine Corps and joined the V-12 program of the Marine Corps. As the year went on and things looked bleaker and bleaker, I decided that I should go on and go in the Marine Corps and do my part. I was a firm believer that it was my obligation as the youngest in my family to do that. I did something then that I certainly wouldn't do today. I wrote a personal letter to the Commandant of the Marine Corps and requested that I be transferred to immediate active duty. He was accommodating. He sent me a bus ticket.
That's a pretty good deal. Okay. Where did you go for training? And basically run a quick resume of your training procedure.
Well, I left home at about midnight in December. Went to Parris Island, South Carolina. Now, the bus didn't go all the way to Parris Island. The bus stopped before it got there. Stopped at Yamasee, South Carolina. Several of us on the bus were met by a drill sergeant in his campaign hat. We knew right away that our life was changed. We spent the night there in a barracks, left early the next morning for Camp Lejeune, for Parris Island, South Carolina. And that's where I spent the next 120 days.
So the training, was this basic infantry training?
This was basic training, really basic infantry training. Excuse me. Everyone in the Marine Corps, your primary specialty number is infantry. It was intensive from daylight till dark. It was training in everything that you needed to know to be in the Marine Corps. Rifle training, maintenance, care and maintenance of your personal self, your equipment, how the change of command operated in the Marine Corps. When you left boot camp, you knew how to do as an infantryman, and you knew the chain of command that you followed and how you would do it. The training was very good.
Well, you went to spend your time totally in the infantry. You made some transition. You transitioned to another branch, I think, did you not?
Well, when I left boot camp, I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Everyone, when he left boot camp, you knew where you were going and what you would be doing. I was to be in artillery. The 4th Marine Division was really just reforming at that time. And when we got to Camp Lejeune, or when I got there, I was to be on a 37 millimeter gun. We didn't have a 37 millimeter gun at that time. I had a 2x4 with bipod legs, and 3 of us would simulate firing that 37 millimeter gun. Now, the Marine Corps doesn't believe in idle time, anytime, anywhere. You were doing something. But that's why we practiced firing that 37 millimeter 2x4. It wasn't long after that we got 75 millimeter pack howitzers, and more men, as more men were coming out of boot camp and getting ready. 75 millimeter was a small gun, but a powerful gun that, if need be, you could break it down and pick it up and carry it wherever you wanted to go.
Okay, after you pretty much finished, you had an interesting trip across the country. Tell us about your wonderful accommodations.
Well, after 4 months at Camp Lejeune, we were transferred to Camp Pendleton, California. We caught the train at Newbern, North Carolina. Now, at that time, the train that we were on was a coal-burning train. We had about 100 to 120 Marines in our car. Now, no air conditioning then, no fans. So you open the windows on the train. Soot and dust would blow in frequently. For the most part, we ate K rations or C rations. But if you can imagine 100 to 120 men on a train car with one bathroom, created a little bit of problem. I think we might, at that time, have invented mooning as we were going across country.
Okay. So you went to Camp Pendleton and stayed there a while, and then where did you depart for going to the Pacific?
Well, we stayed at Camp Pendleton and really practiced intensive firing and deployment of the guns, the whole division. We were there until December of that year. We were told to pack all of our gear. We had a sea bag, which was things that we would not take with us. Our pack on our back was what you would carry with you if you were going into combat. We were told that we were doing practice landings. So we left Camp Pendleton, went to San Diego, got on board ship, came around, landed on the coast of California. Came back to Camp Pendleton knowing that we'd get liberty. We were there about long enough to get a shower and told to pack up. We were leaving again. We went back to San Diego, came around, made another landing on the coast of California, came back to Camp Pendleton. Again, we thought, well, we get some liberty here. We got our shower. We thought, well, we can now leave. We were told to pack up. We're going again. This time, we left for good. We left the United States on Christmas Eve from San Diego.
This was Christmas Eve of 43?
43.
43.
Left from San Diego Christmas Eve. Leaving from San Diego is a little bit like leaving from Newport News, Virginia, or Richmond. You wind out of a channel before you get into the ocean. Well, now, it was a blackout everywhere, so everything was dark. And we were talking about how calm the ocean was until we finally got in the ocean. And then the swells and the pitch and the roll didn't suit too well with people. On the troop ship, we had metal bunks with a piece of canvas stretched between it, about 8 bunks high. A lot of men would get seasick. If you were 8 bunks up, you may not always have time to take the proper precautions. So you'd like to be in the upper bunk. I found that I spent most of my time, not because I was sick, but sleeping on the deck somewhere. So we left straight from San Diego to make a landing at Roy Namur in the Marshall Islands.
When did you learn that's where you were going?
It took us about a month to go from San Diego and get to the Marshall Islands. It took about 2 weeks for us to pass, pass Hawaii. We picked up some more destroyers and other ships from Hawaii as we went by. So it took us about one whole month to get to Roy Namur. That was the longest straight deployment the Marine Corps ever had from the States right into combat.
Well, did you get any specific training for landing on Roy Namur?
Yes. The Marine Corps was excellent about training that we had. After we passed Hawaii, our officers broke out maps and the plan that we had of everything that we were to do. We knew when we'd be landing, where we'd be landing, where we were to go, what we were to do. We went over this constantly, over and over and over. And we had physical training along with it. But the Marine Corps was very good in seeing that all of us had knowledge of what to do, where to be, how to do it. Had good training.
Okay. Once you got there, tell us about your invasion. Tell us about getting off the ship and coming ashore.
Well, the islands we wanted most were Roy Namur. I have a picture of the islands. This is an official Marine Corps book that the Marine Corps sent me after World War II.
Yeah, that's a good picture.
These are the islands. This is Roy. This is Namur. The reason we wanted this was because of this airfield. We had to have that because of the geographical importance of that, plus other places that we would be going. Now, these islands are part of an atoll, the largest atoll in the world, really. And this is right in the middle of the Marshall Islands Atoll. Our landing on D-Day, which was the last of January, there was a string of islands down this way, down from Namur. We landed on an island called Inibur, which was about the third or fourth island down, and there were 60-some islands in that chain. The reason for us landing there was, and this was a different type landing for the Marine Corps, we could bring our artillery ashore and use our artillery for direct support when our infantry made landings at Namur first and then to Roy. So that's why we did that.
Okay, good. Well, how'd you get those guns ashore? That seems like it'd be a problem.
Well, not really, other than swells. The 75 millimeter pack howitzers that we had, we loaded, and by the way, we combat loaded when we left San Diego. We didn't have to stop and redo any of that. That's what some of those 3 practice runs were, to get that right. We put our pack howitzers in a landing craft personnel tank, which is that Higgins boat, that famous Higgins boat that has a bow ramp that comes down. So we had we could carry personnel in there, we could carry our guns, and we could carry our ammunition. And we landed on Inibur about lunchtime on D-Day. I say lunchtime, wasn't any lunch there, but it was about that time of day. We got our guns ashore, we got them registered, we got ammunition ashore, ready for the main push the next day, which was on Roy Namur.
So you went ashore really a day ahead of the troops that were going on Roy Namur, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how long does it take a Marine to get a gun up and ready to fire?
In that particular case, about 2 hours to get the guns ashore, get them in place, get them registered in. In artillery, you want a point that you know you can hit, and your subsequent targets are made in reference to that aiming point. So in about 2 hours, we had our guns in, we had them set up, registered, and we were ready to fire that night and the next day.
Well, did you have resistance as you went ashore? The Japanese provide you with...
Yeah, we had some resistance, but not as heavy as these other islands. The island that we landed on, Enneburg, was a communication island for the Japanese. They had a large communication building, communication towers, water cisterns. There's no water there other than rainwater, so you save all of your water. The resistance wasn't that bad. The resistance was to come at Roy Namur.
About how far was the island that you landed on away from Roy Namur?
It was about 3,000 miles, 3,000 yards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. As a young man, you're what? You're 18?
17.
17. Getting off that boat and going ashore. Can you remember that moment?
Yes, in some ways. My thought was about doing my job. That was it. Get in, get set up, do what I'm supposed to do, as everyone else.
But I'm very much afraid, but yet ready to go and do the job. Or were you afraid?
I don't think I was afraid at that time. I don't think I knew how to be afraid of a war at that time. That came later.
Okay. What if you had to tell us about one defining moment? What's the one thing about that battle which sticks the most strongly in your mind?
Well, we accomplished this with not too many casualties, quickly, and frankly, I thought we were pretty good. I guess I was cocky. I just felt like we knew what to do, we knew how to do it, and we did it, all of us, a team.
So how long did it take you to complete the battle, actually to rout the Japanese?
Well, we were all through in a week of Roy Namur and these smaller islands that I was on. And the 4th Division that I was in left to go back to Hawaii, but the battalion that I was in, we stayed there for 30 days after this to go down all this chain of islands looking for Japanese who might have escaped down that way, who could call in airstrikes or ships or we didn't know what. So we were there for 30 days after that, going from island to island, and we met some of the natives who had gone to these other islands. They were very, very nice people. Primitive living to a large extent, but very nice people. After about 30 days, we did go back to Maui, Hawaii, which was to be our base during World War II.
Well, did you encounter any other Japanese resistance as you moved down these islands?
Very few.
Very few.
Very few.
Okay.
The natives helped us a lot. If they knew they were there, they would tell us.
Okay, you went back to Maui. Tell me about what did you do there while you waited?
Well, in Marine Corps, you don't have any idle time. You are training. We built a camp called Camp Maui, which is today a state park there, beautiful place. We were training all the time. Sunday was somewhat of a free day. You could go to church, you could wash clothes, you could clean your equipment or things like that. But otherwise you were training. live fire exercises, practice landings, things of that type.
Okay, so how long did you stay in Maui before leaving for your next battle?
Let's see. We were there just about 3 months because our landing in Saipan and Tinian was in June
Okay.
of 1944.
So they put you back on a troop ship? When did they tell you where you were going?
Well, this time I was on an LST, but up until this time I'd been on the 75 millimeter pack howitzer. When I got back to Maui, I was transferred to a new unit in the 4th Division that was forming, and we had a 105 millimeter gun. So that being new, stronger, better, fantastic weapon, we trained with that. So when we loaded up to go to Saipan Tinian, which we didn't know that again until we were out to sea, the pack howitzer or the 105 is a larger weapon, heavier weapon, and you can't take it apart and carry it if you have to. So we were loaded into ducks, which had a lift, could lift our guns out, put them on the ground.
Okay, you went to Saipan next, I think.
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that battle.
Well, Saipan was quite different, very much different. Roy and Amur were relatively level islands. Saipan was a big island, had a mountain chain. It had a lot of greenery, vegetation. Stronger defended. We landed and the landing was a very difficult landing. The fire that we got from the Japanese was very intense. We later learned where we landed was a crossroads. There was a road that went around the island, but there was a large sugarcane processing mill there. And there was a road that went from this ring road around the island to the sugar mill, a crossroads. If you are an artillery person, crossroads is an ideal aiming point. And the Japanese had zeroed in on that point very strong. Also, the sugarcane mill had a tall brick chimney. And we learned some 3 days later that there were snipers, observers, in the top of that brick chimney. And right behind that was one of the high points of the island called Mount Tapacha, which rose up to 1,500 feet. So where we landed was at a crossroads with observer snipers in a chimney. And Mount Tapacha looking right down on us. The landing was intense. We managed to get ashore, although coming in, I saw some of our landing craft that were hit by artillery, and those craft would almost explode. We did hit a coral reef, and we had to get out. It was about waist-deep water. And we were wading ashore, and there were some marine bodies in the wash there. And I remember asking a Marine going in beside me there was a body there. I said, get his arm on the other side. Let's put him up on the beach. And we did. That night, we had 12 guns in our battalion, 3 batteries each of 4 guns. That night, we excuse me, we took over that first afternoon. We got our guns unloaded. We got them registered in, and we were ready to fire. But that night, that first night, we took over 200 direct hits. We had a lot of casualties. Of the 12 guns that we had, 10 were knocked out. We only had 2 guns left firing. I myself was hit that first day. The next morning we had to report in that we were no longer combat effective. We only had 2 guns that could fire, and we needed some personnel. Now, we had a great group of people who could help put the guns back together. So it took parts from one and put them on another. And the second day we did manage to get back to be effective in fighting. But we were in a very vulnerable spot, but we had to tough that out, which we did. So from there we moved on and managed to, as time went on, to be successful.
So how long did it take for you to take? How long did it take for the U.S. Marine Corps to take over Saipan?
It took us about 30 days to do that. And each day was intense, the same thing. The Marine Corps had one philosophy: each morning was you advance. We thought we performed very well with our artillery. We could fire just about anywhere that we wanted to. We had the capability of firing over on the other side of a mountain. You might say, how'd you do that? We'd fire up, loop over, and come down. We could fire high explosive shells. It would burst on impact. We could fire time shells that burst up in the air so many feet off the ground. We could fire smoke, star shells. We could fire about anything, and we used all of that. We later learned from some of the Japanese that were taken prisoners that what they feared most were those air bursts, where you could fire a volley of all 12 guns and the shells would burst about 15, 20 feet off the ground and throw that hot shrapnel. Shrapnel is hot like a frying pan. In addition to being jagged and tearing, it burns and sears.
Did you move your gun positions from that spot there by the crossroads and the tower? Or
Yes.
how long did you stay there?
No longer than we could move. In the Marine Corps, artillery is direct support, meaning you are right on the heels of your infantry. You have a forward observer with the infantry who you're talking with all the time. And so we moved frequently to get in a better position to be right up with our infantry. And we did that all the time, move and move.
Okay, so you took about 30 days to take Saipan. Then you had another trip to another island. Tell us about that.
Island of Tinian. Tinian was just south of Saipan, an island of about the same size. Tinian had the best airports, which we wanted very badly. The best landing beach on Tinian was at a town called Tinian Town. Nice, wide, sandy, gradual beach. And that's where we made a feint to make the Japanese think we were going to make a landing. On the northern end of Saipan, Tinian, as you look south from Saipan, you looked right on 3 small sandy beaches, no more than 100 yards wide, each one of them. Not the kind of place you really want to make a landing. You can't get much troops ashore in 300 yards. But with making this feint off of Tinian town, the Japanese pulled most of their troops down there, and we made a landing. There again, I went from Saipan to Tinian in the Higgins boat again. And we made landings on those 3 small beaches very successfully. That was something new that the Marine Corps did, and was really a great move. The fight for Tinian was not as severe as Saipan, not as long as Saipan. Fighting was very intense. I told you earlier that when we came back from Roy Namur, I was transferred to this new organization with 105 millimeter howitzers. My friends, whom I trained with for a year or more, were still in that 75 pack howitzer battalion. And I felt a great loss in leaving them. You make a friendship, a bond that's very strong. So they still had 75 millimeter pack howitzers on Tinian. At one time on Tinian, when we were had advanced down to almost Tinian town, my old outfit suffered 3 direct artillery hits, killed all of the men that I'd been with at that time. Made me wonder, why was I the one not there? But they were all killed there. They did manage to get that battalion back up later on, but all of the men that I was with were gone after that. Tinian didn't last too long after that, and we were through, and of course went back to Hawaii.
About how long did the battle for Tinian last?
About less than 4 weeks, a little over 3 weeks on Tinian.
Was this a vegetated island filled with vegetation?
Yes,
or
yes.
basically flat, or
A little bit of undulation, more flat than Saipan, but had good big airfields, good big flat airfields.
okay? So you after you finally secured Tinian, what was your next move?
Well, after Tinian, we went back to Hawaii, which was our base there, Camp Maui. There again, I moved up to a larger gun. Rather than have 105s, we got 155 howitzer, a much bigger, much heavier weapon. So we had a lot of training on that. In fact, had to move over to the big island of Hawaii to train with it. There again, that training was intensive, ongoing, learning how to use these new weapons, this 155, how to work with the other outfits in the 4th Division in doing that. So we were back to the training schedule again. And that lasted again until January of 45. In January of 45, we left to go to Iwo Jima. Now, here again, our training was very good. Now, Iwo Jima looked like it would be a pushover. It was a small island, almost no vegetation. A sulfur island. You smelled sulfur burning everywhere. The days and nights, the nights were cold, the days warm. You could scratch down in the soil a little bit and get warm from the sulfur fumes. But we were at sea again for about 30 days, going to Iwo Jima. Now, there were 3 Marine divisions to make this landing: the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. The 4th and the 5th were to make landings. The 3rd was in reserve. That 2 up and 1 back was a Marine Corps tactic we used almost entirely. 2 outfits in attack mode, 1 in reserve mode. Iwo Jima again had airfields. In capturing of Saipan and Tinian, we started using B-29s from those airfields at Tinian, bombing Japan. And they had to fly by Iwo Jima. Well, they could give Japan warnings that planes are coming. Plus, Iwo Jima had fighter planes come up and attack our B-29s. Also, if our planes got shot up, which they frequently did, there was really no safe place for them to land. So the reason for our taking Iwo Jima was to take away the advantages Japanese had there. They did have a good air base. They had a mountain on one end called Mount Suribachi, which was the tallest structure of any type on the island. If you were on Suribachi, you had a clear view of everything going on. The beach at Iwo was quite different from anything we had experienced. It was a black sand beach that rose up in a tier of, 500 feet, and then rose up again. In this black volcanic sand, you could take 1 step forward and slide back a half a step. But the Japanese had the high ground everywhere, a well-planned defense of that island. So when we made the landing beach became fouled very early on. Foul from landing craft that had broached and couldn't get out. Casualties were extremely heavy. With Mount Suribachi on one end and the high ground on another, enfilade fire, it just killed many, many, many Marines. We were supposed to land that first day, but we could not get ashore. There wasn't any room on the beaches. If we got ashore with those 155 guns, which were heavy, no way we could have gotten them up those rises in the sand there. So we did not get to land until the next day. Then we had to have tractors from Seabees to get us up those terraces. But that beach was untenable for a long, long time. We did manage to get ashore and did manage to get our guns in position to start firing, but we were the underdog at that time. That was probably as tough as any we ever had, that landing right there. But we pulled it off.
I understand the Japanese were really embedded. They were just almost impossible to see.
Very seldom did we ever see a Japanese, very seldom. They had tunnels all over the island. They had the barracks, mess halls, hospitals, meeting rooms. Some of them even plastered like you'd plaster a room in your home. They had many entrances and exits. If you could see a Japanese at one point, and fire on him, he may be gone and he'd pop up some other place. So we very seldom saw Japanese on Iwo. It was firing into caves, grenades in caves, anything we could do.
Could you fire that 155 directly into Suribachi? Or did you have to lob it like a howitzer?
Well, we could have, but we did not fire at Suribachi. We were firing the other way. The 5th Division, the plan was the 5th Division would move straight across the island and then take Suribachi. Our 4th Division was to move across the island and start up the island. So the 5th Division took Suribachi. We could see what was going on in some cases. You could see men going up the sides, but there again, the Japanese were up there. They all they had to do was roll a grenade out down on the people coming up. So it was tough taking that. But they did take it.
About how long did battle take?
Iwo took a good month to take Iwo.
Of just constant, almost hand-to-hand combat, wasn't it?
Yeah, every single day. And I'm sure to this day, there are Japanese that are buried in some of those caves on Iwo. And it could be some Marines that are buried in some of those caves too.
So did the battle at Iwo just about end your combat experience?
It did, but I didn't know it. When Iwo was over, we came back to the island of Guam, which you've got Tinian, Marianas Islands, you got Saipan, Tinian, Guam. Guam was an American possession or protectorate before the war. Saipan and Tinian were Japanese. On Guam, we were told that we were to get larger guns, 155 long toms, which is a long barrel gun, same size as a 155 howitzer, but a long gun. We hadn't gotten those yet, but we were told that, and our quartermaster was getting in cold weather clothing, which we didn't have. So we knew what the next stop would be. But before that occurred, the atomic bomb came along. And when that happened, I was in the hospital on Guam, had my appendix out. The Marine Corps was under the Navy, and the Navy had our corpsmen, our doctors and things. So they took me to this base hospital. And I remember going in on Guam. It was warm most of the time, hot most of the time. And all you had were pajama bottoms. So they took me in to this base, gave me the pajama bottoms, took me off a gurney and rolled me in an operating room. And I remember looking up, and there were 3 large circular lights up there. And I was laying there looking at that. The prettiest nurse I'd ever seen in my life came down to the foot of the table and grabbed the pants legs of my pajamas and gave them a jerk. Well, that was the biggest shock of my life right there. That didn't last long because I got a spinal and it took care of that. But anyway, I was in the hospital when the atomic bomb was dropped. I heard it on the radio. There again, I didn't know what the atomic bomb was, but I knew from the talk that it was something big.
Jack, we kind of got to wrap this up, but could you give us an idea of what the impact of that war made on your life?
Well, I had the greatest respect for teamwork in whatever you do. War is a bad thing. I hate to see any war anywhere. I had great respect for my fellow man. Had then and still have to this day. But I'm proud of our country. I'm very proud to have been a Marine, to have been an American, to have tried to do my share. And I've always felt an obligation and a love for my country. And that just brought it out more in what happened. But I have a great deal of love and respect for my fellow man and following in the footsteps of many of these people.
Well, Jack, we just really appreciate what that whole generation of yours did for us. Many of us know that we really couldn't have lived as we have lived without you. And we really appreciate you coming and sharing this with us today.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, just pointed out, this is that area. So
Well,
this is
look,
Hawaii over here.
all right, Hawaii, Roy Namua, Saipan Tinian, Iwo Jima, in Japan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that so much.